Welcome back. This is African News Network. You are joining us live from our studios in Johannesburg in Midrand, and we continue to probe into what perhaps maybe is an interesting one, because I don't know, do you consider yourself black excellence, Cindy?
Why black excellence?
Okay.
It's not just excellence.
Excellent.
Yeah, but of course we'll ventilate the black excellence angle, especially when it comes to state-owned entities. And many of our analysts have been asking, how does a man responsible for the turnaround of three major government entities end up drawing all-round criticism and very few accolades?
His colleagues at Eskom may have given him a rousing welcome as he resumed office on Monday, but the critics have not been so kind. If the African National Congress veteran leader Carl Niehaus is believed, the disapproval stems from the fact that the talent that he has and the success he's had overshadowed by him being a black executive.
And here's a look at Brian Molefe's credentials and when he was at the helm of various organizations, as recounted by Carl Niehaus. As head of Public Investment Corporation, he promoted black senior management in the private sector companies, invested the monies of black civil servants, and exposed race-based investment practices at Barloworld. And he forced the powerful white chairman of Barloworld board, Mr. Warren Cleolo, to retire as group chief executive at Transnet. He changed the financial fortunes of the struggling parastatal around.
He also ensured that black entrepreneurs got a far larger share of the Transnet business, and in his last stint at Eskom, he successfully tackled the issue of load shedding, made Eskom a financially viable entity and able to meet its financial commitments, challenges that traditionally had gripped of the large white capital-dominated coal mining industry.
He also promoted agreements from black-owned coal-producing companies.
Take credit. It's Brian. Brian used to come to work at 5 in the morning and leave at 10. And he sat down with the engineers and devised the Tetris plan, which is about planned maintenance of our power stations. And very gradually, we moved away from unplanned blackouts to planned outages, which were slotted in sequence. It was his brainchild, and it worked. I'm proud that we have made a difference at Eskom and saved the country going into a state of blackout.
Until the president actually uses his prerogative and calls a commission of inquiry, or there is another form of investigation, Mr. Molefe is not guilty of anything yet. But the man hasn't been found guilty yet. He must be seen as innocent until he's proven guilty.
Comrade Brian Molefe was deployed to Eskom, and he turned it around. When everybody was saying, we will never recover from this disaster of load shedding, he turned it around, and today we are here seated. It's winter. It has been cold in the past days, and we have never experienced load shedding.
So where do these controversies then stem from? The most common stick used to flog Molefe is State of Capture report, which is said to have revealed Molefe's close relationship with the Gupta family. But the critics simply ignore the fact that closeness does not imply wrongdoing, and Molefe has not been found guilty in any court of law. Detractors claim Molefe has been implicated in the Public Protector's State Capture report, when the truth is that the observations contained in the former PP's Thuli Madonsela's report have not been proven. The latest criticism of Molefe is that he did not deserve the 30 million rand payout given to him after 18 months as head of Eskom. But Eskom has said that it was obliged to compensate Molefe for the remaining term of the contract that was due to expire in 2020.
I'd like to reiterate my call for a decisive investigation into allegations of maladministration raised in various reports, including the former Public Protector's State of Capture report. Clouds of unproven allegations and counter-allegations are doing state-owned companies and our country a great disservice.
ANC veteran Carl Niehaus says there's a trend behind black managers being targeted, and here are some examples he cites. Opa Magashula, former commissioner of SARS, was forced to resign from the revenue services following the Sikakane report, and this despite the report finding no evidence that Magashula had committed a crime. Christopher Hlekane, former CEO of the South African Post Office, was replaced by CEO Mark Barnes, and the media has praised Barnes despite the Post Office losing 1.13 billion rand in the last financial year. Collins Litswalo, acting CEO of BRASA, was fired for allegedly having illegally increased his salary by 350%, and the Pretoria High Court later ruled that Litswalo was in fact entitled to the increase. Joining us in studio is Sepo Khadima, political analyst, and Sfiso Mahlangu, resident political analyst. You're welcome to join in as well. Gentlemen, good evening to you and thanks so much. We have Carl Niehaus, former spokesperson for former President Nelson Mandela, on the phone line as well. So is there a deliberate attack on black excellence, particularly in SOEs? Or is that a rhetoric question?
Well, it is factual when you can give the number of examples that have been given. And when, in fact, the track record and the facts surrounding those people in terms of their performance paints a completely different picture, and a case in point being one Mr. Brian Molefe now, and of course a number of other executives that whenever they start looking at anything that can change primarily the status quo we've had in corporate South Africa, then obviously they get punished. But one of the most flabbergasting and weirdest comments that you can hear grown-ups say is that there is too much corruption in South Africa. And that is the most foolish thing that a grown-up can say when such a grown-up has never been to any police station to go and lay a charge, to adduce evidence that prima facie can be at least be presented before a court or be prosecutable. And it always astonishes me that we've come to accept and even tolerate people when in fact theirs is to character assassinate other people by just shouting the words corruption. It is high time that in South Africa we must demand that if anybody goes up and say, listen, so-and-so is corrupt, they must be held to account to produce the evidence, but more importantly, on why, when there is a positive duty upon them to have to go and report such a crime, because corruption is a crime, why they fail to do so. Because it cannot be correct that you then go and, by innuendo and conjecture, accuse people who then, for the rest of their life, based on whatever that would have been in the media, that they are accused of being corrupt, and yet they had never been, when we live in a country that is advocating for the rule of law. And all of the people, I mean, I've heard right across the political spectrum, both from the senior leaders of the African National Congress, the Democratic Alliance, EFF, all of them, they say all of these nonsensical comments of corruption, yet none of them have ever been to any police station with objective facts to support their allegation that Party A and B is corrupt. And that, unfortunately, those comments have had the direct opposite effect of actually impeding the war on corruption, because the corrupt, they end up walking away without their deeds ever being scrutinized, investigated, and prosecuted, when those are assisting, as I say, through accusation, through innuendo and conjecture. And that must stop. But in terms of, is there attack on black excellence? Most certainly. Every single black executive in this country, they soon find out that being appointed to that position is nothing but a splendid misery.
Let's draw the parallels. I mean, you know, I can see the argument that we're building towards with regards to it being black excellence, as it were. Let's talk about the fact that there seem to be other black individuals, academics, or people who are astute in business, or intellectuals, as it were, who seemingly don't feel this wrath that you talk about, Sepo. They're on the other side. You know, I can name a few. Your Sim Shabalala, who's a co-CEO at Standard Bank. Your Sipho Pichane, who's the CEO at Anglo. Are you not saying that perhaps there's a difference in what kind of black
Well,
excellent
it
person
depends,
are
but
you?
I mean, I think with Mr. Pitjana, we can't talk about them. It intrigued me that just last week, the CEO of Anglo Gold Ashanti came out and gave a statement of reporting on the operations of Anglo Gold Ashanti. Their cost per ounce on gold is, I think, $813 or something to that effect.
Right.
But the point I'm making is this. You have Mr. Pitjana, who is the chairman of the company, has never once been quoted anywhere globally on his views about the gold mining sector or the mining industry as a whole in terms of where it is going. So therefore, I've had that long-held belief that he's there nothing but a glorified clerk. Because if he was moving, if he was transforming, if he was dealing with the real issues of unemployment or declining employment in the mining sector, if he was now assisting in the parity wage, that the apartheid wage gap must be eradicated completely in the mining sector, that the 12,500 rand that has been demanded for years now, where 34 miners in fact were killed for demanding a living wage of 12,500 rand. If he had been addressing those issues, he would not have been the darling of the media, he would not have been the darling of many.
That's what I'm trying to get
his
to,
silence
that's what
is
I'm
the
trying to
one
get
that
to.
at the end of the day drives us to say that he's nothing but the glorified clerk. But anybody who deals with the issues of we need to transform, we need to change, I can assure you every one of those executives, all of them, whenever they try and bring about changes, radical changes in that corporate entity, they get punished, and they get punished severely.
Hence I'm asking, is there a difference in black excellence? Does it mean that you have to toe a particular line if you're black and excellent, and if you're black and maybe pro-transformation, then you're labeled a different black excellent person?
You won't be excellent if you don't advocate for radical changes, because this country, in the era where we are, we demand to have radical socio-economic transformation, and that means that the workplace must be transformed. Just last week, we had the employment equity figures coming out. The numbers are there that black people don't feature anywhere in terms of corporate South Africa, in terms of leadership. And those that are there, you find that the moment they open up their mouths to advocate for change that is radical, they get punished. So therefore, you can't be excellent when you are docile and timid.
All right, let's invite, before we get to your reactions, Carl Niehaus, former spokesperson for Nelson Mandela. Good evening to you, and thanks so much for joining us. Now, the Black Excellent, or rather the state-owned entity chief executives we're referring to, in your last interview we had, you were talking about a conspiracy that is orchestrated against black excellence. Maybe you need to give us the context as to why state-owned entities are so important and the role they played during the apartheid regime and where we find ourselves today.
Well, let me first of all start with what had been said just a moment ago, that it is very important for us to make a difference between some of the executives, black executives, who do not necessarily challenge the status quo, and those black executives, among them, there's also Mr. Brian Molefe, who have challenged the status quo and have taken very strong action to promote black entrepreneurship in South Africa. And I believe that those black executives who take that position are the people who end up becoming the targets. Now, in the old system of apartheid, the state entities were very directly and specifically used to undermine and attack the majority of black people in South Africa. Now, in the new South Africa, it is absolutely critical that those entities be used to promote black excellence, but also to promote an economic approach that will make it possible for the majority of black people in South Africa to become fully involved in our economy. And again, Brian Molefe has been an example par excellence of doing exactly this. He did this at the PIC, he did it at Transnet, and he was involved and busy doing it at Eskom when he was put under the kind of pressure that came from the state capture report from the former public protector, Advocate Thuli Madonsela. And I must say that that report of Advocate Madonsela is a poorly written, hastily produced report with unproven allegations. Minister Lynn Brown was absolutely correct when she said at a press conference that Brian Molefe had not been found guilty of any offense, and that the legal maxim that a person is innocent until proven guilty has to apply to him in the same way that it should apply to any South African. Unfortunately, we have seen in the South African context that especially black executives have been subjected to the most unfair media reporting. And many of the people who read our mainstream newspapers could be forgiven for often believing that black executives have been found guilty of certain offenses, while it hasn't been the case. You know, we have another case of the former acting CEO of PRASA, Mr. Collins Lutswalu. There were allegations that he irregularly and wrongly increased his salary by 350%. Subsequently, this matter was taken to the Pretoria High Court, and Mr. Justice Peter Mabuza found that Mr. Lutswalu acted perfectly correctly and that he was entitled to the 5.9 million rand that the board had to pay out to him. Now, the problem is if you go and look at our newspaper reporting, you see massive reports about the so-called irregularities that Mr. Lutswalu committed. But if you look for the correction of that situation, if you want to see the reports that say that the judge found that he had not acted wrongly, you don't find them, or they hidden away in the middle pages of our newspapers. So black executives are being given a raw deal. They are being treated poorly, and especially those of them who are prepared to work for radical economic transformation and those who are prepared to attack and to challenge the vice grip of white monopoly capital on our economy.
Mr. Niehaus, please stay on the line. As Fiso Mahlangu, resident political analyst, it sounds like you really have to be cut from a different cloth and cut above the rest as a state-owned entity executive because of being maligned and all the attacks at you. But Brian, it seems, has got his eyes focused. I'm not even going to go into the pension payout, but just in the reception that he received from staff members and saying that will continue. You know, there's a commitment of the plans that have already been in place that gives one a semblance of hope that really this radicalism might just be something we realize in our lifetime.
Well, radicalism will come, but it's not going to be an easy battle, Cindy. It's going to be very, very difficult. And we are going to suffer some liabilities. In fact, trusted leaders are going to get smashed in the way that Mr. Molefe and others have been smashed. We must always remember that the furor and the oppression of black people and the oppression of black leaders does not start today in the hand of radical economic transformation. It started in the days of slavery, in the days of Kunta Kente moving on to pre-democracy, to the days John Langalbalele Dube having to start the ANC, the days of Mahato, Dube, Mahabane, Chaka, Solomon Mahlangu, to where we have now the Claudis, Brian Molefes of the world, Ms. Dudumieni, and all those who lead parastatals in this country. If one would say Dudumieni has underperformed at SAA, they are lying. Because SAA today is doing better than it did in the days of Cheryl Carolus. If one says Mr. Claudio Motsoeneng has underperformed and should be released because advertisers don't want to advertise with the ANC, as a counter-narrative as South Africans, we should say, then those advertisers shouldn't come to the state broadcaster, because the state broadcaster must play South African music, because this is not America, this is South Africa. It will happen with Brian, it will happen with Mr. Tom Moyane, and it will happen with any other leader. If one is to consider when SAA has ever not been in trouble, you will not find the answer. You look at the South African Post Office CEO, who is not attacked, and people are not calling for him to resign.
So you're saying it's because he's white?
Because he's a white man. And SAA is in the worst trouble. SAPO, the South African Post Office, is in the worst trouble it has ever been in. So there is an attack on particularly black leaders. In the transition government, what was supposed to propel democracy was you take the prudent, the intellectuals, you take those who fought in the struggles, those who have information. Information and education is not only found in universities. You don't necessarily need an MBA to be influential and to be a good leader. Our forefathers, our grandfathers did not have MBAs, yet they ran very powerful organizations, the likes of Maponya, big taxi organizations, big supermarkets. So it shows that black people have an ability to lead, they have an ability to govern, they have an ability to account, you know, in terms of business. But there is still an oppression. One must always bear in mind that the JSE is still 73%, 93% owned by white people, and they are not going to give it away easily. So there is an oppression on black leaders, particularly at SOEs, because we say those SOEs are ours. You know, the SABC we say is ours, ESCOM we say is ours, Transnet we say is ours. And if those leaders are black, and if those leaders are women, there is an oppression on them. It must always bear in mind with us that 97% of the black the JSE does not belong to black people. It does not belong to the majority, and white people are not going to give that away.
Yeah, Rekgadima, what do we decipher, though, as South African citizens? Obviously, are proud of this country. We've got families. We want to see it prosper and raise our children in a safe environment that is equitable for all to share in, with all the noise that's going on. To allay white fears, if you will, that the Swart Gafar has not been reincarnated. It was never there. And going forward, that we really want to build a country that will benefit all.
Look, unfortunately, I think that we are entering another phase of a long winter of discontent. And it's from discontent that we are going to have instability. I think for some time we have taken it for granted that we have a country which is stable, and that it can continue to really delay the freedom dividend for the majority for infinity. And that cannot hold. Something is going to have to give. And that's something that has to give. It has to be a radical socio-economic transformation. So it means that every person who is appointed into these positions of leadership, they need to go there with that understanding that here they are entering a state of war and that there are going to be casualties, but they need to get their psyche correct the same way. But one of the most disheartening things that we find is that the political leaders, and specifically in this case I can refer to the African National Congress leadership, who understand now that they have given the president an unlawful ultimatum that he must rescind the reappointment of Mr. Molefe to the position of ESCOM. So when you have an ANC that actually can go to the extent of giving an unlawful instruction, they are only confirming that which the DA has been accusing them for years, that the ANC does not respect the Constitution and the rule of law. And it is absolutely shocking that you can hear, and they have not denied it, and hopefully maybe they will come out and clarify their position. But they've not denied it that yesterday in their meeting, they gave that instruction. They said in a meeting, and I know of another instance also where they did that, and that is unlawful. So if you have even the governing party itself conducting itself and giving unlawful instructions, that is a cause to be gravely worried, because you're going to have a situation soon whereby there will be no black person who will agree to go and serve in any of these positions, because there's just too much trouble, and you will have black people who are excellent, who are subject matter experts, moving to other jurisdictions, and that's going to be a brain drain that we can least afford.
Yeah, very, very sad, Tsepo, and sometimes very disheartening, unfortunately, to hear some of these things. For us, I think it's a lesson, not only to just our panelists here, and we want to thank them, Mr. Carl Niehaus, former spokesperson for former President Nelson Mandela, Mr. Tsepo Rekgadima, political analyst, and also Sifiso Mahlangu, who's our resident political analyst. It's a lesson. I think it's a journey, Cindy, that we'll have to take to teach our children, because what they see when they they start work in the office, it's a construct of what they have there. And unfortunately, it's going to take a long time to remove that thinking cap that, you know, you can be black, you can be excellent, and you can succeed.
And coexist with other excellence.
Absolutely.
You don't have to be black excellent. You can just be excellent.
Let's do that.
That's what we are.
Let's do that. And we'd like to thank our guests, obviously, as they pop in as they want. And we take a short break and